Hi. So I wanted to do a quick video. Let me just quickly share my screen. And the video is going to be on um, the reason why people have a very limited view on autism and and why that is absolutely not their fault. So let me just get my screen up. Let me just move my camera. So I have discovered many things on my journey down the rabbit hole, and I've not quite come up yet because I'm sure there's still many more things to learn. But this is kind of my professional and personal take on the matter, and I think that it's something that is quite insightful when I share it with others. So I thought that I would do a quick video on it because I think that many people might be on that kind of same journey that I was on a couple of years ago, and it would just be useful to know. So um, the first thing is where did you learn about autism? So I know that many people learn about autism in a school setting. They might have learned about it either in primary school, they may well have come across it maybe in high school, where they have seen a student that they know well or that they don't know very well, but they know that they have autism. I think that that's kind of become more prevalent in recent years than it was maybe when our kind of parents was growing up. But I would say that some people learn about it there. Some people learn about it kind of when they might be referred for anxiety and things like that. They might learn about it within a kind of NHS setting. Or sometimes, alternatively, you might learn about it more extensively because you might have a family member who has it, so you learn about it at home. But I would say that depending on where you learn about autism, you will often find that your view of it will be restricted depending on where you learn about it. And that isn't your fault. And if you learn about it in a school setting, the presentation of what autism looks like to you will be limited. And there is very clear reason for that, which I will go into. Why listen to me? I am somebody who has had experience. So I will go back in time. I had that same experience that I was just talking about, where I remember we had an additional needs unit, and we saw a very limited amount of people with additional needs and hidden disabilities and things like that. But my experience of autism back in high school was very limited. I knew little about it. We was taught nothing about it. All I knew is these children who would be in my class occasionally, and that was my limited experience of it. And I've come to learn that the experiences that I now know of are so wide ranging in comparison to that very small experience that I had back in high school. I then obviously went and did sorry, I haven't even mentioned that my career now is I am a qualified counsellor. I have my own private practice, so I work in the private sector. But before that, I worked in high schools. So I worked in a couple of high schools where I would work on a group basis with a group of students, or I'd work one-to-one. And a lot of these students that I worked with, not all of them, but a lot of them did have autism. So that is when I was introduced to girls who had autism in particular, and how drastically different of a learning curve that was in terms of, okay, I have not been taught any of this, and I really need to understand these girls' needs and how things, feel for them, how they experience the world, so I can help them solidly. So what ended up happening is that is probably when I entered the rabbit hole of, okay, how does autism look in girls? How is it experienced, and how is it different to what I was already limited in knowledge to? And I started to discover that many people would not know what these girls were struggling with until it reached a point of overflow. And I thought, okay, there is so much that I need to learn here and that many people need to learn here. Along this same time, my son was maybe about 3, and 3 or 4, and he was struggling. He was in nursery and he was not talking. And nursery picked up on this, and obviously they picked up on the fact that he he could do with being referred. So I then became this strong advocate mum who was like, okay, I will get my son's needs met. Because I knew, especially from my experience of working in a school, that if you wanted change and if you wanted things to happen for your children, you had to be the parent who shouted the loudest. And I don't think that any parent goes into this wanting to fight. Of course, they would just like it to be as simple as the children who can enter mainstream school, mainstream nurseries, and that sort of environment and just thrive. Wouldn't that be nice? But they can't. So you learn that you have to fight, and you learn that every day might be a battle, but you will do what it takes. So I was learning a lot more about this, and I was starting to notice that I felt like my son potentially had traits of autism. And I started to notice things about myself at this point too. And I was like, okay, I will mention this to the pediatrician. And I will be honest, at this point, he said to me, oh, he makes eye contact. Yes, honestly, that is what I got told. Oh, he makes eye contact. He's not autistic, but he isn't speaking, and he is using echolalia, which is basically where you, if you, when you, he did start to learn to speak, which was maybe about 9 months after his initial consultation. When he did learn to speak, he couldn't speak in a conversation. He would say things like, so if I said to him, my son's called Xander, Xander, how old are you? He would say, Xander, how old are you? He would repeat it back to me. He would not know how to have that kind of conversation. And his vocabulary that he was starting to express was not your usual vocabulary. So even though he was late in speaking, it wasn't like mummy or daddy. It was stuff like Tyrannosaurus Rex. Which is so complicated of a word. And all the dinosaur names because he was dinosaur mad. He absolutely loved it. And cat because he was cat mad as well. But yes, basically not the usual stuff. So he was referred to speech and language, where again I had to advocate strong, and he got a developmental language disorder diagnosis. Fast forward, because obviously you don't want to hear all this story, but fast forward to last year, 2022. And we was putting forward for his EHCP because school have realised that this is not just going to get better on its own. He needs that support. And this is something else which I will go on to in a moment. But they basically realised that it's going to become a problem for them because they have boxes that they need to tick. It's going to become a problem for them because he's not able to meet that threshold. So that's when usually a child will get support. Just make a mental note of that because I will go on to that later. So basically what ended up happening is upon this creating the EHCP for his needs, they flagged up that they think he's autistic. And I was like, yeah, okay, let me go away and do some more research. So I went back into the rabbit hole that I didn't abandon. I still tapped into it from time to time, but I went in deeply and I discovered so much. I discovered so much about autism in girls and how it presents itself, and actually how my son, possibly because he's surrounded by many females, possibly, but a lot of his traits was very social, but was very much on the kind of female representation of how females present with autism. So, and he got his EHCP and he got a high level of funding. So this indicates just how important and how sorry, I've lost my train of thought, how not only important it was, but how complex his needs are and how much they do need meeting. So back to my kind of experience. So not only do I have my professional experience in the high school, I now have this personal experience at home with my own son and with me advocating for him. I then went and worked in a school, and I was getting students through my door at 16, 17 who was struggling due to the array of experiences that they had got to at that age where they just could no longer cope. They was at meltdown stage and they was pursuing a diagnosis because it had been missed, and it was often female, again, which I will go into in a little bit. And then I went into my own private practice because I started at this point to, and I'm not going to slander the system, but I can just say that I'm not in full support of it. And I started to realize that I want to make a change. I want to advocate for people in a solid way. And I don't want to lie to myself about what I believe is true and how I think that these systems are a bit oppressive to children. So I went into my own private practice, which I'm still in now. So I have my own business. And let's just say that not only do I obviously do my counselling and that line of work, but I will often step into an advocacy role of doing supporting letters, making phone calls, because it is starting to become prevalent that there's many children being missed who definitely, and I'm not just talking about could, definitely are high up on experiencing the suffering linked to a potential misdiagnosis. Misdiagnosis or just a missed diagnosis, which again I will go into speaking to about in a moment. So I don't just, obviously this video is pretty much exclusively going to be on autism, but it's not the only neurodivergent experience that people experience where they might not be getting seen to their full capacity, where actually, because it's not something visible often, unless it becomes visible, but they are getting missed. And this is where we get to the good bit. This is the bit where we start to realize what the system is set up like and why actually it isn't your fault that you've had that limited view on what it is. But what the problem is that if we, and again, I will go into this slightly later on, but the problem is if we don't directly take care of these people with these hidden disabilities, whatever that looks like, whatever condition that is, the problems that then will arise in complication to being delayed in that process. So upon school saying, you know, we think he might be autistic, he's showing some clear symptoms of it that are causing him difficulties, along with his DLD, which was his developmental language disorder. So I was like, okay, well, his pediatrician appointment is coming up soon, which I've exclusively said, because they've tried to discharge him a few times because they're like, oh, he looks like he's getting his needs met. Yes, great, but you will not discharge him. And we have to be strong like that as parents. But we have to basically kind of go, no, I need this as a continual thread of support. So I went to see her, and obviously she's been his pediatrician after that first guy who was like a makes eye contact, since he was about 3. And 3, no, 4, sorry, about 4 years old. And so she knows him quite well. And we spoke about what school had said and what I'd noticed. And I wrote a list of traits that he experiences. My son was there and he kind of was in agreement with the things that he experiences. And she was like, absolutely. Let's get him referred, because we don't want to wait till high school where then, you know, we're having to wait another 2 years for a potential diagnosis. Let's try and get that support in place. So we wrote the list down and she referred him. And this is the letter that I received from the NHS. When we are considering that a young person requires an assessment from the neurodevelopmental team, we ask that the referral comes from an educational setting. The reason we ask this is because young people presenting with behaviours suggesting a diagnosis for autism spectrum condition or attention deficit hyperactive disorder is often picked up on and supported in school. Now tell me what problems that potentially poses, because I can think of a million. I tell you what, I'm extremely fortunate that I already know that school are going to support this, because they are already aware of the complications it poses for them if they don't. However, the issue that I have with that letter is that it suggests that the school know the children better than the parents, or better than a professional he has been under since that age, which is mind-boggling to me. But I also think it's because it limits the amount of people who will come through their door. And I know they're swamped. I mean, I don't undermine that at all. I understand that they have a difficult situation about the influx of potential people needing a diagnosis. But that doesn't stop the need. And that's not anybody else's problem. But anyway, I digress. The issue I have with that wording is that it's suggesting that the problems pose only as problems in school. Why is that? And it also suggests that the school are most equipped to dealing with it. And also they're the most equipped to deciding whether it's a problem. And I just don't believe that to be true. So it's great when teachers have a great relationship with the children, but when you're teaching 30 to 40 children, that gets diluted down. And it also means that unless that child is presenting in a box type way where you cannot handle it, that diagnosis is just not going to happen. That suggestion of what that child might need is not going to happen, because you're just going, until it becomes a problem for them, it's not a problem. But it is a problem, because I know many children who manage in school, they prefer to be invisible. They don't shout, they don't want to be seen, but their struggles are so immense that they get home and they do nothing but break down and cry. And then they become school refusers, which then becomes a problem for the school. And then they might get a diagnosis. But why are we waiting till that point? Why are we waiting until behavioural problems become present for it to become something of importance to the school? Because it's not the importance of the school that matters, it's the importance of the child that matters. And I just find it very perplexing. And it makes me realise that unless you fall into that box, which is impulsivity, behavioural issues, school refuser, anything that basically are unable to access the curriculum. Sorry about that. Not the best word, clearly, that I can get out on my mouth. But unless you are one of those, if you are not going to be detected, even if you are struggling so bad that you cannot cope. If you do that at home, it's cool. You don't have autism or ADHD. Or if you can manage through a school setting and mask your way through, because masking is a big thing, isn't it? In the autistic community, then that's good, we're fine. But I'm going to tell you why actually that is not fine. That is absolutely not fine, and why it's a problem. So I'm going to tell you why it matters. And I've got a few statistics here, so I'm going to have to just reduce my screen down. So studies. So I can, if anybody watches this and wants links to these studies, I can send them. But studies have estimated that up to 94% of people with autism have or will attempt to mask their symptoms at some point during their lives, which can lead to long-term impacts of those living with the condition. This is something that I realized for myself, because I don't know, if I potentially have this condition. I had such a severe breakdown, which potentially could be burnout, that I lost my memory. And nobody got answers for me. Nobody knew what that was. And it was so scary. I remember having brain scans and nobody could find anything. But they were just like, what the hell? I was hospitalized because I just lost my memory. And I now realize how all these things now make sense. But I've got to stress that, because I have not flagged up to anybody till that point. And it was a problem then. Do you get where I'm going with this? Anyway, masking may relate to negative outcomes for autistic people, including late or misdiagnosis, mental health issues, burnout, or suicide ideation. Children with autism are 28 times more likely to think about or attempt suicide. See, I tell you what that does to me inside my body. It makes me angry and filled with passion that I want change, because that should not be okay, and that should not be the point that we are pushing them to because of our lack of ability to meet their needs. The risk of death by suicide for autistic people so really exclusively without an intellectual disability, is greater by 9 times. So these are the autistic people that are more likely to mask and seem fine. Basically, the ones who will never, in a school setting or through the NHS, will get a diagnosis until they become an adult and they fight for it themselves. Is this okay? Is it okay because they're not causing a problem for anybody, or because they're just causing a problem for their parents? I think that a lot is placed on the parents and the parents' responsibility, which I get, but parents don't parents are often fighting, and if they're not fighting, they just don't know enough. But we should be teaching. We should be teaching in school exclusively what autism looks like in females, what it looks like in maybe the Black community, and how that might be different, which obviously I will go on to as well. I think that what we have to realize is that it looks different. It looks different in everybody. The saying goes, doesn't it? You meet one autistic person and you've met one autistic person, because it doesn't present the same in males as it does females. It doesn't present the same in different cultural communities because of expectations. And I'm not okay with people being missed, and then the consequences of it being missed being something that they have to suffer with later in life due to ableism. So let me find where I was up to. Yeah, so basically it's those people who mask and seem fine. That's not fine. That's not fine. These are the exact people who will be missed as not having their disability being taken care of, and often will fight for that late diagnosis. People with autism on average die, and I hope that this doesn't trigger anybody, and I apologize if it does. Please fast forward and just don't look at the screen. But people with autism die on average 16 years younger than a neurotypical person. And this is often due to comorbid conditions like epilepsy, suicide, which we've exclusively spoke about, heart disease and cancer. And if anybody wants to look at the effects, the adversity, because when you're masking, you are causing adversity, has on your body, read these two books I would suggest: The Body Keeps the Score, and What Happens to Our Physical Body When Our Emotional Body Is Not Taken Care of. The Body Keeps the Score and The Deepest Well, which talks about the implications on children's health from like different communities of people, and it's very insightful. All right, moving on. So I just think that we should be the change. That if I don't say this, if I don't make this video, then I am gatekeeping information that I think that everybody really should know and get to make up their own mind. And I'm sure that people might watch this and not agree, and cool, you can go about your day, or you can argue with me if you really want. But I think that we have to be the voice of change, and autism is not an exclusively, it's not exclusive to boys. It's not a disability exclusive to boys, just like many different things. And I'm sure that there is other things that probably need talking about that I don't speak about in this video. But it exists, and it doesn't just exist in white boys, because ultimately that is the one that is often the most diagnosed in the presentation of it being picked up. But it exists in girls, and it exists in the BAME community, and it's often overlooked. But then the severity of the suffering that will happen as a consequence of that is too important not to address. I want to quickly end the video just by telling you some things that I found, which I will read to you now. So basically, challenges in getting a diagnosis for some of the BAME community is due to the community or the family's level of understanding of autism, barriers to accessing support services, which could be to do with like English not being their first language, problems with professionals, and I can't stress this one enough, that kind of lack of feeling seen by the professional or being patronized is prevalent. You know, awareness and understanding, you know, denial and isolation, again, really important things that we have to speak about. I'm not gonna, you can obviously go and read those on your own. And within women, it obviously, like I said, it presents differently. So it doesn't present itself the same way as it does in boys. There is suggestion that women are able to kind of camouflage their way through as a way of not feeling like they stand out. So they might do things like that. So their interest could fit into more socially normal things. But it's like, for example, if two girls liked horses and one learned everything that there was to learn about horses, and one feel likes horses and pretending to play horses. how, you know, that could potentially be missed. I'm not saying that would say that they're autistic, but you get what I mean. They're often misdiagnosed women. So a lot of them misdiagnosed with conditions like borderline personality disorder, eating disorders, bipolar disorder, and anxiety, which actually are often comorbid with autism. And again, it doesn't mean that you've got autism, but it's just something that, again, is more likely to be something that they say girls have if they're presenting in a certain way, rather than going, oh, okay, wait a minute, this could be flagging up something different. I hope that this video has been insightful, and let me just stop sharing my screen. I don't know how to do that. But let me go back to this. Yeah, so I hope this video has been insightful. And I hope that it has helped anybody who is either on this path to understanding, to understand a little bit better. I also hope that it helps you want to advocate if you need to advocate. I hope that it helps you either be that person yourself if you need to be, or to find that support. Like I say, that I know that it's something that I do for clients. Obviously, I know I'm in the private industry, but I have contacted schools because it has been missed, and often the school will be really quite supportive. They'll go, do you know what? With this letter of professional support, I will refer on. So again, I hope that that is useful. 1 second. And yeah, I hope that it was something that it was a video that you gained some level of knowledge that you might not have known before. It is Autism Awareness Month, and I would like to hear any thoughts or any questions that you might have. Please get in touch. I will speak soon.